Hey everyone, this is Elisa here with the Rite Stuff, and we have a very special guest today. We have Alan Johnson, who is one of the top leaders in the insurance industry with American Family. He has been in the industry since about 2012 and has had some really prestigious awards. I've been really impressed. 23 and 24, he was ranked among the top agent of the year. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the state of Utah, that is correct.
Yeah, the state of Utah.
So I was the number one agent in the state of Utah for 23 and 24 year.
Okay, that's perfect. I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit, but the topic for today and the reason why he's here is there's a critical topic, excuse me, that that's not talked about a lot. And it's one of those things that I think is frequently dismissed and doesn't get the attention that it needs for business owners. And that is earthquake, when it comes to earthquakes and insurance and what's covered and what isn't. And we're going to dive into all of this and unpack all of this so that you can help make the best financial decisions for the short term and the long term that you possibly can and get the most accurate information possible. So I'm going to turn it over to Alan, let him introduce himself and tell you a little bit about what he does and what he's here today.
Yeah. So I'm Alan Johnson. It's the Alan Johnson Insurance Agency. It's powered by American Family Insurance. I do a lot of insurance. So I'm actually licensed in 22 states. So a lot of insurance agents are only licensed in their hometown state. I have 22 states that I'm affiliated with. And then we're talking about earthquake here. So earthquake, I'm actually licensed in California and I'm actually licensed in Utah. And as you guys know, there's a fault line that runs throughout the whole of Utah. And that's what we're going to kind of bring to light today is that fault line. And what to do if anything ever activated off that fault line. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, that's basically it, Elisa. I'm Alan Johnson, American Family Insurance. I'm kind of going to instruct you, kind of walk you through what to do and what not to do.
Okay, that's great. So let's just start off with the super basics. I'm a business owner, let's say, of a manufacturing plant of 150 people. I just got up and going. I'm probably dirt poor investing everything I have into this, but earthquake is important and I want to really think about things. So tell me what is covered under my insurance policy generally and what isn't.
Yep. So general, if you're a commercial, you're a business owner, obviously you're covering your property. If you own the property, you're covering it that way. If you're renting the property, you're subleasing it and you're covering it a different way. Okay. So, which we don't have to really get into on those parts, but what a lot of people overlook is they overlook the aspect of the earthquake insurance. Okay. So a lot of people that get in trouble, their assumption is, and I emphasize the word assumption, they always assume that earthquake is just covered through a general policy. If you're purchasing a policy from me, you're thinking, oh, it has everything. It's going to have everything. The policy is going to have earthquake. It's going to have flood. It doesn't have any of that. Okay, we're here to protect your business, so we're going to protect what you're asking us to protect. And then you have to get into the good agents. That's what makes me one of the number one agents, is because I ask questions. I want to know what you are afraid of, what would happen. And if you're a larger company, yes, it is more expensive to put this earthquake policy into place, but it is well worth it. One, we live on a major fault line. Okay, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen, but it could happen tomorrow. It could happen a million years from now. That's what the funny thing is about earthquake is nobody knows. It's unpredictable. We still don't have the information. We don't have the seismic test. We don't have things that are in ground. Everybody thinks we have all this technology on earthquake. It's still it's a fresh thing that we just don't have a resolve to. Right. To notify people, hey, an earthquake is coming before it happens.
Yeah, but what we do know is that we are due for an earthquake in the next potentially 50 years, which could be potentially a 7.0 or greater, which is probably equal to about 700 times the equivalent of the earthquake that occurred in Magna about 5 years ago.
Yep.
So when we're talking about earthquake, we think about walls falling down, structural damage, things like that. One thing that really just kind of haunts me, and it led to all of this research and digging all this up, is that there's secondary disasters in an earthquake, such as flooding, such as fires, and it's come to light that if you have a fire or a flood as a result of an earthquake, those things are not covered.
Absolutely correct. So what you're asking is, what a lot of people do is they think that earthquake coverage, when you purchase earthquake coverage, that it's just an underlying coverage that covers absolutely everything. So you mentioned fire and flood. Fire and flood is actually, when you purchase an earthquake policy, even though it's derived from the earthquake, it is not going to be covered on your earthquake policy for fire and flood. So in what people are like, oh, fire and flood, I don't understand. Well, you got to remember, if a big earthquake hits, it's going to take out pipelines. It's going to, I mean, everything underground is being moved by this seismic activity, which is, it's something unseen. So people out of sight, out of mind.
Yes.
That's the mentality that people have. So, but what is called an endorsement on your policy, earthquake insurance also has those endorsements. So you can endorse for fire, you can endorse for flood, but you have to add those things on there. Again, it comes back to people assuming.
Yes.
People cannot assume that. Ask the questions. Do not be afraid to ask the questions. And this is the funny thing. The more successful people are, the less questions they ask.
That's scary.
About their earthquake insurance or their business insurance.
Because you think there's so much more accountability there.
Absolutely. Well, accountability is the big thing. That's the answer key right there.
Yeah.
You have to be accountable for these things. And there's so many business owners that have so much on their plate that they want to overlook one of the most important factors, which is your insurance.
Yes.
Okay. Adding those endorsements. That's what I do with people. I cover you how you should be. And that's what I believe leads to success, is because I'm going over these policies with people. I don't care if they want to hear about it or not. They're going to hear about it from me.
Good. That's why I go to you.
But yeah.
So, there's statistics out there that, I probably will misquote this, but like 40% of businesses, like small businesses, probably will never be able to reopen again after something of that magnitude. I don't think the numbers would be that high if everyone was prepared like they should be, as far as being able to rebuild, because it's not going to be overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to take other policies. Maybe talk about the endorsement that talks about other types of coverage for your business.
Yeah, so other types of coverage. So what we're talking about is business interruption.
Okay.
So business interruption is kind of where we're leading into. So business interruption is very important. It is the most costly, the number one thing that affects price with earthquake insurance, but it is the number one hugest claim.
Yeah.
So business interruption, when I say that, people are like, what is business interruption? So business interruption means, let's say you have a manufacturing company, okay? If you have a manufacturing company and you depend on certain things to make whatever you're developing, okay? If you're making styrofoam plates, I don't care what it is, but to press those plates, you have machines that do so. Well, if we have a big enough earthquake and structural damage comes down, you're talking about beams falling and it ruins all this equipment. Not only that, you're talking about your most valued possession, your employees, okay? They have nothing to do now. So how are they going to get paid? They're going to be displaced. Their families are going to be hurting for money and things like that. Well, that's what this endorsement, the business interruption, but again, the word endorsement, you have to add this to your earthquake policy, okay? So, but it is the number one cause of loss. And the reason why these companies can't open up their doors again is because they lose this money. They get lawsuits from their employees that they're unable to pay because production slowed down or has stopped completely. Well, when it comes to business interruption, you're talking about something that usually only is on your policy for 12 months. If you're a huge company and it's going to take a lot more than 12 months to rebuild this and put more manufacturing, whatever you're manufacturing, whatever the utilities that you're using to make the product that you're making, if it's taking this time to put that in, let's say you've got a big company, say you got 50 to 60 to 1,000 employees. Okay, you're going to have to factor that in, and you're going to have to add more time, because most of these business interruption policies, and we're talking business interruption, we're talking about power to it. We're talking about water to the facility. We're talking about everything that runs that facility.
Well, I would think too that if my business is dependent on another business for supplies, that business goes down, that's going to directly impact me. So
business interruption, that actually takes care of the appointed business that you're talking about. So any business adjacent, so that you're supplying something to that business that is making that other business run, That's what this business interruption insurance is also for. You're paying employees, you're paying for business supplies, you're paying for anybody that's attached to you that rely on you for their business.
Oh, wow.
So there's so many things into it, but it is one of the most expensive parts of it, but it is the most important part of it.
So speaking of cost, would you say as I've spoken with, people and agents, and it's hard to get these statistics, but I could probably safely say maybe between 20 to 40% of companies maybe have earthquake insurance.
It's actually lower. Yeah, you're only talking about maybe 12 to 13% of companies actually having business owner insurance. Again, it matters where the location is too.
Yes.
So in California, they've made it so expensive in California that people really can't afford it. Even I don't care if you're a bajillionaire. I mean, it's a pretty big hit.
Yeah. So that's what kind of, is it cost prohibitive? Is that the reason why, or is it time? Is it education, knowledge? What barriers are preventing people from accessing these?
Yes, I believe the barriers would be cost. Mm-hmm. So the people don't want to face the cost. When people get insurance, when I say people, we're talking businesses here. When businesses buy insurance, they want to keep their overhead as low as possible. Right. So one way to do that is to get the basic insurance, in which the basic insurance unfortunately doesn't come with earthquakes. So prohibitive, to me, it's worth it. Right. Especially if you're based off of location. California, no way would I ever own a business without earthquake insurance.
Right. Now, to those people who move from California to Utah to run businesses,
yes.
Do you know where you're living? Let's talk about this. So we talked about this fault line, and they're finding more fault lines that are even connecting together under Salt Lake City. So, there's just like this perfect storm. And historically, Utah, it was once Lake Bonneville, and there's sediment, and there's something called liquefaction that can happen during an earthquake in addition to landslides. So essentially the ground, when it shakes and it acts like water. So even if there's no like structural damage from the earthquake itself, it can tilt or get your house off foundation and
creates erosion.
Okay, very good.
Absolutely.
So the shaking, like if you live closer to the mountains, that shaking is going to be intense, and you have landslides and those kinds of issues. But if you live further out west of the mountains, that shaking is going to get bigger and bigger, and that is going to be even more intense. So just because you don't live near the mountains doesn't mean that you're not at risk. So that's where things like the flooding comes in, all these underground pipes, the little ones, the big ones, the runs that one in the mountains that transport the water from the dams in Heber, the Jordanelle. So I imagine if there's any structural damage, erosion, any of that there could be massive amounts of flooding. I don't think people think about the types of flooding we're talking about here. Yep. They think about rain or, maybe a pipe burst here or there. But no, this is like extensive, massive flooding that could take place.
Absolutely. So that's a great point. But we're talking about end of the world kind of stuff, right? I mean, which is
just like worst case scenario.
Yeah, worst case scenario, dam levees, things like that, yes. Breaking and flooding. You guys got to remember, in Utah, we live in a valley. Yes. So, and the valley is surrounded by huge mountains that are also surrounded by rivers, lakes, and yes. things like that. So that's kind of what we're talking about. If the tectonic plates shift underground, obviously we know it creates tsunamis, right? Yes. So, but it also creates breakage of land, which also creates, I mean, if you raise a lake level or something like that and that has nowhere to run, it's going to run inside of our valley. That's where it's going to run. So this little map, I know it's on a piece of paper. Don't fault me for having it on a piece of paper, but you can see these red lines. If you zoom in here, you can see these red lines. Everybody only pays attention to this one over here, which is the Wasatch Fault Line, okay? Nobody ever pays attention to the West Side Fault Line. So, but what I'm trying to describe to you, that's in a valley, and as you can see, this valley runs along this lake here, okay? Like I said, if tectonic plates shift in these valleys and levels that we have these rivers and what we call canals here in the state of Utah, well, if those get if they get flooded, where are those going to go? They're going into the valley. They're going into your homes. They're going into your businesses. They're going everywhere. So to be prepared for this stuff, which we'll get into a little bit later in this podcast, but the fault line is huge. And it's not just one, it's a lot of fault lines. in the state of Utah. So, and now if you put this in California, so you people that move from California, there's a river of red lines going down California. So, but this is a huge fault line on the Wasatch Front, but it is also a huge fault line on the Great Salt Lake fault line as well.
Right. So we were talking a while ago, we were talking about the fires in California and how it kind of, it blows your mind. Like if you live in an area that's, high risk of fires, historically, maybe there's been fires, like, this is not shaming or anything. It's just a question that comes up in my head is like, well, then why wouldn't you have fire insurance? Not if it was taken away, that's a whole nother thing. But again, it's something maybe people overlooked or it was cost prohibitive. But then I look at our situation here in Utah and, it would be really unfortunate at one point after an event like that to be saying, now, why didn't we have earthquake insurance? We knew the risks. We knew where we lived. We knew all of the potential consequences. So why weren't we prepared? And those are what we're trying to avoid here by having these conversations, why I think that it's so important. So we've talked about floods, we've talked about fire, we've talked about operating costs. What other types of gaps maybe business owners might overlook or need to know more about? So
the gaps are like the inventory, flood production, or we talked about a lot of the gaps. So let's see, gap coverage. So there's two types of insurance. Okay, as far as earthquake insurance, there is traditional, which pays on the base assessed damage, like the physical damage, things like that. And then there's one that's called parametric.
Yes, that's something that was new to me.
Yeah, so parametric insurance is something that's kind of big and it's more cost effective. So we were talking about cost a little bit earlier. Yeah. Parametric is actually more cost effective, which means like the one that we had in Salt Lake and Magna and stuff was a 5.6. Okay, so parametric doesn't go in until the big one, like you said, like the 7 or the 8s or whatever. Yeah. Parametric kicks in then because that's when no matter where you're at, you're going to feel it and there's going to be structural damage.
So they just don't question it. You have a 7.0, it kicks in.
It kicks in.
And you don't have to prove all of the damage,
Yep, and it's paid up to a certain amount. So that's what a lot of people are starting to go to is the parametric, which is fantastic insurance. It has a lot of coverage. It's basically saying, hey, this is what I think my operating cost. This is what I think this is going to be. This is what. So it's like a pay-all for everything, if that makes sense.
Yes, which that leads me to this really important point is as a business owner, and let's say I come to you in that same scenario. I've got this plant, 150 people. I've got machines, inventory, all of the operating expenses. But I come to you and say, hey, write me a check. I had damage. So what's your next question to me? What do I need to prove as a business owner in order to get that reimbursement?
That is a great question. So the big thing about this is how quickly you want this process to move. So if you're one of those business owners that do not have your finances in order, if you do not have inventory, if you do not have, if you're a scrambled business owner, meaning like you don't take accountability, like we talked about before, and you don't know what your assets are, you don't know what you have, and you don't have a file for those, but those are the big things that people don't do. It blows my mind to see when business owners that are super successful, when you come to an inventory list, they're like, well, we don't know exactly what we have. How do you not know how much you exactly had? But those are the big things that you want to take account for.
Right. So would you take my word for it? Let's say,
no,
I had
insurance
A,
does
B,
not
and
take
C.
anybody's
I had an expensive
word.
Bosch dishwasher in my break room. I had
So obviously, insurance companies have adjusters, is what they're called. Okay, whether it's earthquake damage for a business or your normal homeowner's insurance or anything like that, they're going to have adjusters that come out, and they're not going to pay you $1 over what you had. They know if you had a Bosch washer and dryer, metal catches on fire and gets distorted, but it's not going to go away. There's going to be serial numbers still left behind. There's going to be things like that. So they're going to do their homework. I mean, insurance companies don't want to pay $1 more. Unfortunately, I know I'm in the insurance business. Do not hold me to that. But
it's true.
They're not going to pay $1 more. It's a business. Essentially, it's a business. They want a profitability. margin, just like anybody else wants a profitability margin in insurance, and they're going to do everything they can. So that's why it's so important to have an inventory of what you have, what supplies you have, whatever if like, I'm gonna go back to the manufacturing business, whatever you have an inventory that you have to, let's say you have $300,000 of inventory, you want to be accountable for each piece of that. Okay. Because if $1 of that is missing, the insurance company will find it. I will promise you that. Okay, so they will find that dollar and deduct that $1 that we're speaking of. So make sure you're accountable. And we'll probably bring that word up a million times, or you should bring that up, because there's so many people that out there that are not accountable. And I'm afraid to say that some of those are big business owners. You know, you have to be accountable for everything and everyone in your establishment.
Yeah, we'll definitely jump more into that. For sure. I would imagine, though, some advice would be to make sure that you're updating that maybe every 3 to 6 months. I mean, if I'm starting out a business and I make $300,000 the first 6 months, and maybe I 5x that, the next 6 months to a year.
Yes.
I don't want to cheat myself out of anything, so it would be to my advantage to make sure I'm keeping this list wherever I'm keeping it in the cloud, or maybe offsite somewhere safe.
Yep. And so most people, what you're talking about is they do inventory every quarter. So most people do a quarterly inventory, which you should. Like, everybody should do an inventory of what you have and stuff like that. But what we're going to talk a little bit more about the earthquake side of things, as far as being prepared for that, what to do, things like that. But you need to take accountability again, and have a good number, and always review your inventory that you have. But speaking of that, you're also going to want to reconvene on your insurance policy at least once a year.
Okay.
You should be meeting with your agent once a year to review what coverages you have. Maybe you do 10x it, and we only have you down for $300,000 of inventory. So remember, inventory is covered through your insurance policy. But again, earthquake, if that happens, that knocks everything out. If you don't have earthquake insurance and it was derived from an earthquake, you will not have coverage for your inventory. So
that's so important. That's so important and critical. Like, if you don't take anything away from this today, take that one statement away. That's so critical.
Yeah.
So critical. So with business owners, let's say, okay, you talked me into it. I'm going to get the coverage. I'm going to make sure I'm doing my best to make sure I've got all my bases covered. From an insurance perspective, am I missing anything else? Like, I'll meet with you once a year. I'll update my inventory. I'll make sure I have flood, fire, operational costs. Anything else that I might not be considering?
No. So most of what you're talking about, obviously there's liability. Liability is one of the biggest portions of it. So liability is your sue me money, basically, is what I tell everybody what it is. Okay. Your liability is for your employees. It's for, depending on what, again, these are all endorsements. So again, don't hold me to the fire on your business insurance. If you want business insurance, call me and I can go over and review it. But it does come down to your agent. So I believe that a good agent will review every policy. I don't care if it's your regular homeowner's policy. I don't care if it's a renter's policy. I don't care what it is. You should have an agent that either has a staff that can review that with you, or somebody that can review it with you as far as the agent wise. Because there are a lot of agents out there that don't have a staff. And it's up to that agent to review these with you. But again, ignorance is not bliss in this case, okay?
No.
So you want to make sure that if you have extended liability, meaning more inventory, more employees, things like that, that you are capturing that within your insurance, okay? You never, ever, that's what sinks ships, okay? That's what ruins businesses. That's what takes businesses down, is from these little nuances that they know they should do, but they don't do. Again, accountability. And that's what makes businesses fail. And it only takes one time to ruin that.
Yeah, we just think it's never going to happen to us. And there is, in each industry, when I talk to a plumber, when I talk to an insurance agent or whatever, and my background is a nurse, I've been doing emergency preparedness stuff a lot of my life, so I get that. But when we start talking about technical things, about endorsements, you're talking like a completely different language, and that can be intimidating to some people to feel like they can ask questions without feeling stupid. And so I appreciate how you explain things, because It doesn't make me feel less than. I walk away feeling educated, empowered, which is awesome. I think that there's terminology like in the nursing world that people might not understand. So I want to kind of make sure everyone that's listening is understanding the terms that we're using. There's things like structural and non-structural that comes up. What do those two things imply?
Yep. So structural damage refers to your buildings, your outside, your cements, your things like that, physical aspects of it. Unstructural are the employees, the systems that go down. Again, referring back to the business interruption and things like that. Those are the non-structural, the flooding, the people that maybe get hurt within the building, those are the non-structural things. And those are the things, again, that you have to add to the policies and ask your insurance agent, do I have this coverage? What if, and what if? Okay, that's the questions you should be asking, and you should educate yourself enough if you care about your business to know these questions.
Right.
Okay, the insurance agent, me, I would describe that to every single person, but I'm one of 3%.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of people that don't educate people when they buy insurance policies. And it's funny that you mentioned language, because every corporation, every business has their own language.
Yes.
Okay. And if you speak your language to a customer, they're like, okay, you lost me, just sign the policy.
Yeah.
You know, so you want to break it down, not in layman terms, but in everyday people terms.
Yes.
Okay. So you want to explain coverages and things like that. But yeah, so I mean, it's a great question. As far as I wrote some stuff down here because there's a lot to go over with commercial insurance. So yes, I brought papers.
Yes.
Okay.
We all have to.
Procedures, agendas, insights, flooding, structural, non-structural. So non-structural, what it's listed as definition-wise is fixtures, equipment, inventory, and data systems. Okay, and a lot of people don't understand data systems, but if you have an earthquake, okay, we run off of fiber optics.
Yes.
Okay, so if plates are shifting under the ground and it's causing that, guess what? Those fiber optics, very thin. So those wires will be cut, so you'll lose all access to any, most businesses are ran off of a private security fiber optic or whatever.
Yes.
You have to have some kind of security to run. Listen, I am not technologically advanced. So, but there are fiber optics. I do know that just from the insurance world and the language of that. So if those fiber optics and everything get cut down, you're not going to be able to run your business based off of that.
Yeah.
Just that alone.
Or access your data.
Any data that you have within your system.
Right.
So everybody should have a backup system, but we're not here to describe what you should have electronically.
Right.
I'm just telling you things.
Good old paper and pictures, there's something to be said for that.
Yes, absolutely. Papers, pictures. If you need a pop-up book, we got one for you.
It's so true. So a question that popped up, speaking of, in my head when you were just talking about that is, if I'm an employee of your business and I'm injured and I'm at work and it's during the day, are you liable for my medical bills at that point? Is that workers'
Are we
comp?
talking about earthquake?
After an earthquake, yes.
So again, that goes back to the liability aspect of it, right?
So that go under a general liability policy or like a workers' comp thing? Or
Anything derived from an earthquake will not be covered if you do not have earthquake.
So if I don't have earthquake and I've got 10 employees that are seriously injured, what happens?
It happened because of an earthquake, you're going to be in a lawsuit. Okay, so that's what this is what businesses need to understand. The reason that we have earthquake insurance and the reason it is expensive is because we know things like this are going to happen. We know your employees, if the big one hits, the 7+ hits, we know that there's going to be damage and there's going to be injuries and things like that. So that's why if you're in a location, and this is a misconception too. People always think, oh, location, I'm nowhere near the fault line. Does that mean I don't need insurance? Absolutely not.
No, it makes you more so.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're in a low risk area is what they call it, it happens all the time. Do you think Magna was a high risk area? Absolutely not. But that's where the last one, where the biggest part of the 5.6, that's where it hit, was in Magna.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of the older areas have the non-reinforced masonry that
100%.
is more subject to damage than any other structure.
Yep. And nowadays, I mean, they have so much technology for earthquakes and things like that.
Yeah.
Even in the Salt Lake buildings and stuff like that, the temple that they built and things like that,
Yeah.
they have structural engineers that went up under there and put the sway, what they call the sway,
Yeah.
the sways to a certain amount. I don't know
Yeah.
what it's called. I don't
Yeah.
know the technical term for
But they're
it.
essentially retrofitting the whole thing
The
to make sure that it's...
retrofitting buildings. But a lot of your smaller business, your mom and pop shops,
Yeah.
you know that they're not going to have that. The old structurals downtown and things like that, they're not going to have that unless you have the money to put that in, which is super expensive.
Yeah.
We're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars to do that to your infrastructure after it already exists. It's astronomical in cost.
Yeah, more so than having earthquake insurance to rebuild
Absolutely.
afterwards.
Yep. So, way more astronomical. And
Yeah.
then plus you have to pay for it now. You don't
Yeah.
have to pay for it
Yeah.
hey, if an earthquake happens kind of thing.
So when it comes to deductibles and costs that I would need upfront in order for things to kick in, like, you know, on my homeowner's insurance, I pay premiums, but then I have an X amount deductible that I have to pay, and then I get whatever my terms on my contract say. So I would imagine if I had a $150 million business, is the deductible like maybe 15% of that? Am I close?
Yeah, you're spot on as far as deductibles wise. They go anywhere. They range from about 10 to 25%. Okay, depending on what plan you get. And most bigger businesses, they do the higher amount. They do the 25,000 because they can afford to do the 25%. Okay.
And that keeps their premiums
That keeps the premium lower.
Okay.
So if you're looking at a business perspective, if you have a small business, you might want to do a high deductible to make the cost less for you. Okay. And a lot of people do that, but you got to remember 25% of whatever it may be, business wise. Let's say it's a $150 million policy.
That's $150 million for a 15%, maybe, right?
Yeah,
No?
well,
Right?
$150 million business. Let's say the structure is $150 million. Okay. So if the structure is $150 million, you're coming up with 25% of that, 10% of that, 15% of that, and that's a large number.
Yeah.
Okay. But a lot of these businesses that are $150 million, they have the capital in order to do so.
Right.
So, but we're talking about your smaller businesses, which America's ran on small business.
Yes.
Okay. The smaller businesses, again, you're going to play high deductible game. You're going to keep your costs low. So your overhead each year, your tax guys being able to facilitate some of that cash too, as far as what it would cost for the insurance. And if you have a good tax guy, we're not going to, but anyways, those are costs that people don't think of. They don't ever think, oh, I'm going to have to pay out, $1 million home. I'm going to pay 10% of that. So I got to pay $100,000 to that, so they don't ever think that. Same thing with a small business. If you're 10% deductible, you're not going to, that's a lot of cash flow for you for a small business. For $1 million business is $100,000. Okay.
But how hard would that be to come up with all of a sudden on the spot? If you need to go into
remember, insurance companies aren't cutthroat where they're going to come after you and say, I need $100,000 today. Okay. There's ways to work around what you pay, but you work that way out with the claim department of whatever insurance company that you're affiliated with. Okay. So, and I don't have a directive to that. I don't deal with that part of it, unfortunately. So I don't know what that looks like, but I know that they don't say, hey, you need to pay me $100,000 and you got the third to do it.
Yeah.
So we are flexible. Well, most insurance companies are flexible because we do care about our clients and we do care about the people. And that's another big thing is you need to find somebody who actually is invested in you. You can see I'm pretty passionate about when I speak. Okay. So when I speak, I'm passionate is because I do believe in this stuff. I do believe I am helping people. Most people refer to insurance, earthquake insurance, as scams. Okay. It's only a scam until the one time you need it. And then it's not such a scam to people anymore.
But I believe if you can make good educated decisions that just will help your business.
Informative decisions.
Then you have a faster recovery and you can get back, to getting your employees back to work and getting things on the road again.
But that is a key part of it, being organized, being structured, where if you're running a business, being structured and having a plan, having something in place. If the worst came to worst, what are you going to do? And when it comes to earthquake, that is the worst. If we have a 7.0, that's going to be the worst thing that you'll ever go through. And you need to have that plan. You need to have a plan for your employees. You need to have a evacuation plan. You need to have, there's so many plans that you need. You need to be informative to your employees. You need to show them where the medical kits are. You need to tell them what the best case scenario, and in case of an earthquake, what is the best case scenario for if rubble starts. Unfortunately, there is not a best case. Find the most solid structure. Get under the most solid structure that you can possibly find. If you can't find a structure, you cover your head, you cover your neck, you cover your vital areas. Okay, you get into the fetal position, you cover those vital areas. But those are things that a lot of companies don't do. They don't run through the process. Unless you run through a process, employees have no idea, and there might be mayhem why this earthquake is going on.
You know, and I appreciate that so much because, and we're going to get into all of this, but when you drill with your employees, you'll find things out like when the lights go out, you might not be in an area that's surrounded by windows. It might be pitch black. So if you don't have flashlights in strategic areas, how are you going to get to your emergency box? You know, there's little things that you'll find out. You know, in clinics where I worked at, we would waste time going from room to room. Oh, I already checked that room. Okay, well, why don't we put a piece of tape across the doorway? That means that room's already checked, and move on. Or a pillow out in front of it. That's a sign that, you know, that room's been checked, just to make it more efficient. You know, so as you drill these things, you'll be able to find holes and find gaps that are important, that because time will be critical at that moment.
Absolutely.
You know, and I want it, maybe it's a good time now to maybe segue into it, but I want people to not just think about the earthquake. And I'll be talking about this up in here this weekend. I want people to think about, okay, that 30 seconds, you know, things are shaking, things are rumbling, people screaming, things are falling, you know, you're in shock. You know, you can't be like, hey, is that an earthquake? You know, like, did you just feel that? Like, no, like this is like the real thing. Then you're on the next 60 seconds, okay? However long this earthquake lasts, let's say, okay, it stops shaking. Then where do you see yourself? You know, are you trapped? Are you injured? Are you on a top floor of something? Are you on the bottom? You know, think about where you're going to be if an earthquake happens during the middle of a workday. And then think about what tools and instruments and medical supplies you have to address those initial serious injuries. You know, do you have enough tourniquets to treat more than one person? Do you have more than, you know, a few pressure dressings to handle multiple injuries if you have a big employee? You know, OSHA has a list of things that they want you to have to be compliant, or ANSI, and it includes like 50 Band-Aids and, you know, all these other things. But if you take it to the next level and do it, why are we doing this? You know, what do we really need to treat massive injuries on site? You know, and if for some reason the roads weren't travel, you know, what's the word? Not travelable, what? Drivable, whatever, because of structural damage, then do I have enough food and water to sustain people for at least 3 days? You know, what if there's injured people in my facility that I can't move and help's not coming anytime soon, but I'm worried about my family as a business owner, but I have an obligation to my employees? These are moral and ethical questions that you need to think through and plan for. You know, do you need to create a hierarchy of people that are designated to stay there with people and take shifts? Or do you have a waterfall call? I mean, what is it that you have to get people to help each other and not just abandon ship and leave injured people there? So there's a lot to consider when you're trying to prepare for an emergency. And one thing I'm really passionate about is having like an emergency box, you know, things that, whether it contains roll cards and these plans that people can go to, and, you know, leather gloves to prevent your hands from getting cut, whistles, flashlights, you know, paper, signs, medical supplies, food, water. There's a lot that you kind of need to really think through that 72 hours, and who's on site and who's your manager at 2 p.m. if it happens at 2 p.m, or if you're open all night long, who's there at midnight, what's going to happen, you know? So long story short, there are a lot of tools and resources out there to help business owners, because I'm not saying all of this to overwhelm people, but I want you to be able to utilize the tools and resources that are already out there. And in April, It's the Great Utah Shakeout. It's
Yep.
usually, I think, on the fourth week of the month, usually
I'm not
third or
sure
fourth.
which one it
I think it's the April 17th. I didn't look it up before I came, but I would encourage business owners to register to participate in that. I think it's about 10 or 10:30 in the morning that, they simulate an earthquake drill, which is the perfect time, even if you don't have anything set up. But go through the scenarios. It's a great learning opportunity. Take notes, have a debrief right after, and talk about what did we miss? What do we need? What's critical? Do we have pictures of the damage? Do we have, from financial to the people?
Yep.
All of that is huge.
When we're talking about earthquake, though, we want to make sure that we have the people on our first and foremost
Yes.
thoughts. Business owner, you have a lot of things going through your mind, but you should have your employees and the people first.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's what the preparedness is for.
Yes.
So, and the funny thing is one of the most critical things is actually a flashlight.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't think about that during an earthquake. So you get power, everything cut off
Yeah.
to you. You get water supply, power, everything cut off to you. You do need a flashlight. So it is very critical for these people to know where these flashlights are,
Yeah.
where these medical kits are
Yes.
and stuff. I know somebody can provide those medical kits if you guys are wondering. So, absolutely. So she is fantastic at that, though. But that's her passion.
Yes.
She's also passionate about this job, just like I'm passionate about insurance. Okay. And the great thing is, you mentioned food.
Yeah.
So a lot of business owners don't think about that. They don't think about food. They don't think about food and water. Okay. Your water supply is cut off.
Yeah.
Your electricity is cut off. You can't do anything.
And sanitation.
So you need to have a preparedness kit
Yes.
as far as not only medically, but you need to have a supply for, let's say, I would have a 72-hour supply at least.
At
That's the minimum I would have for my business. And I would want my employees to know where that is.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And I would educate my employees to have the same for them as well, to carry in their car at all
100%.
times, in their locker. You never know where you're going to be and where it's going to hit. I did a little research on the last big 7 earthquakes that hit the world. At what time of day did it hit? Was it in the morning? Was it at night? And it was almost split right down the middle. It was 50% in the middle of the night, before 6 a.m. And then I think it was like 40% during the day. So it's a 50-50 chance, I mean,
So
you
what
can't
that
predict
means
that.
is an earthquake is unpredictable. We have no technology to predict an earthquake.
So you need to be prepared for all scenarios, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
Just think about the cycle day to day, where you're at in your life, and the people that are important to you and that you're responsible for. And a first aid kit, this is my rant, you can pull me back here. If you get
No,
one
it's very
from
important.
the store, or you get one from a company that just says this is certified as, it's approved, and it's 280 pieces or whatever. I mean, you're getting a lot of alcohol wipes that you don't need, and you're getting a lot of 2x2s that are not going to do anything in a real disaster. So myself, this is where I get so passionate, is I would love to sit down and visit with business owners,
Educating.
to educate them. They don't have to buy a thing from me. Let's just have a conversation about what that looks like, and about the type of medical supplies we're talking about, and the type of basic training. They don't need to be surgeons. They don't need to be doing chest tubes or crikes or things like that. But if they can know how to properly hold pressure, and how to apply a dressing, or how to apply a splint to immobilize, an open fracture or something going on an extremity that's probably more significant. Now, this is kind of the inside scoop, is as a nurse, I've been involved in different hospital system drills. I hope the hospital system's wrong with them. But I can honestly tell you that if you think you're going to get medical care in a timely fashion after an earthquake or major disaster, you are gravely mistaken. And I use the word gravely very purposefully, because it can be not just hours, but days or weeks before you get treated for the most basic injuries that you would normally go in and get treated for. Let's say you have a bone sticking out of your arm, that is so far down on the list of major injuries and people's attention in a hospital setting that are trying to, get to the critical people, schools and children, and, and if ambulances can't drive on the road, it's going to take some serious time, is what I'm getting at. So you've got to know how to treat wounds for an extended period of time, and how to prevent infection, and have a proper irrigation supplies, and know how to treat them, and have more on hand, not just the 2x2s and the alcohol wipes, that checks a box for OSHA or a regulatory agency. That doesn't do the right thing, if you will. So there's a lot of education from insurance to the medical side, to the emergency side, to the rescue side. You know, people who take CERT classes probably can speak better to, you know, what equipment and things that you need to help rescue, crowbars and, you know, that type of equipment. But from the medical side, the most urgent thing, like he mentioned, is your people. And having key first aid kits in your emergency boxes is so critical, because eventually the dust is going to settle and people will look to you. What did he do? Did he bail on us? Did he have what we needed? I'm fine with staying where I need to know, you know, with my broken leg. I know you need to go check on your family, but leave me with a few resources so that I can, you know, survive a few days here if I had to.
Yes,
you know, because I can't walk
absolutely.
home with the open fracture in my leg to get to my family. So communities will depend on each other, and you'll need to look to your neighbors next door, you know, at McDonald's or whomever, you know, because that's going to be your first responder. You yourself will be a first responder for sure. And if you're my neighbor, you know,
Yep.
I'm going to be looking to you. Hey, what resources do you have? What skills do you have? What equipment do you have to help me? And what do I have to offer you? So suddenly we're going to be these little micro communities that are going to be trying to just survive. But when that dust settles and, you know, something that was so super simple turned into an infection and sepsis and someone died, as something that was so preventable, you know, those things are hard to explain away to a wife or to a husband, you know,
Yep.
after the dust settles. So that's why it's so critical. I don't want people to be in these situations where they're doing these woulda, coulda, shouldas, whether it's financially with their business. I have an interest that McDonald's survives, you know,
Yeah.
something like that. I have to
sure.
have their Cokes.
Yep, absolutely.
If you're a coffee drinker and you need your caffeine, you need that in
I
your
need my
emergency
caffeine.
box.
I need my caffeine. So,
What you're going to need during the day, you're going to need during the day in an emergency too.
and I completely agree with that. And what I hate nowadays, we've gotten into a society where people are afraid to help other people because they're afraid of a
Yeah.
lawsuit.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, that's ignorance. Okay, so
Yes.
just because you're afraid because you don't want a lawsuit, there's also something called humanity. And believe it or not, you can actually be sued for not helping nowadays. So
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword. Do you want to help? Do you not? Be a good human. Help somebody.
And I
Okay,
love
and
that.
know
I
how
love
to
that.
help them.
So you use the word human and humanity. Be human, you know? And this is a whole nother rant, or not rant, it's just I'm so passionate about people helping other people and breaking down those barriers to find out why are we not helping people. And one of them is people
also
are afraid
having
of
the
being
knowledge
sued.
to do
right.
so.
Or
Yeah.
basic, very, very basic knowledge. You know, again, you
CPR
don't need to
should
put
be
in
basic knowledge nowadays.
Exactly.
So.
And, you know, the Good Samaritan law, I did a little research on that. I'm like, how many lawsuits have really come as a result of people trying to sue other people? Now, it doesn't stop them from trying, but there has been very rarely have they ever been successful. A judge looks at that like you were trying to save a life. You're doing what you could. You didn't practice outside of your scope. You did the basic chest compressions. You did the basic trying to hold pressure on a bleed. You know, that's just not going to happen, you know? And to be able to live with yourself in your conscience saying, oh, no, I didn't want to get sued, you know? What? That
Yeah.
doesn't compute in my brain. Just like it doesn't with you with
Humanity.
insurance people. Like, why wouldn't you want to have insurance, you know?
Yeah.
So these are all things to be kind of be thinking about. And again, not to overwhelm. And in a little bit, we'll talk about your resources and tools that are at your disposal to help you think about this in a little more strategic way, in an operational way. But I think that business owners, it is just so critical, whether you're small or big, to take your employees, you know, health and well-being as your priority. And if you do the right thing, everything else will fall into place. You know,
100%.
whether you're not financially prepared or what, you'll have an army of people behind you that are loyal because you had their interest. You know, there's something about that. I'm finding that the employers that are calling us to have us go in and do CPR training or tourniquet training or just basic first aid wound care, that those employees are feeling that dedication and loyalty to their employers because they see that they're invested in their health and well-being. They're invested in making sure that they're going home to their families at night, which is huge.
Yep.
You know, you just don't see that every day.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. And then as far as if I'm an insurance agent, I am an insurance agent. if I'm asking questions, what questions should I ask? That's the biggest questions I usually get as far as the insurance, to break it out into insurance. And my biggest questions are, what's excluded? That would be one of my first, what's excluded? What endorsements, because you're going to, if you don't know the word endorsement by the time you finish with your insurance agent, then he hasn't done his job. So, but what endorsements do I need for this earthquake insurance? What does it exclude? And then as far as the natural disasters after the fact, that the insurance, what coverage, what does that look like for me? Those are questions to ask. And then as far as the liability being medical kits and stuff like that, I mean, those are the emergency preparedness part of it is essential. And even as an insurance agent, it isn't my job to sell you on being prepared for these small things like emergency preparedness, but a good insurance agent will have you prepared for every aspect, and he should be passionate about the people that he is insuring. So, and that's what she's so passionate about, is the people that she's helping with these medical kits and having the right equipment at the right time for whatever situation that might arrive.
Right. So. I mean, it could be just you driving down the road and coming on across a car accident, or, you know, on a hiking trip with your dog, you know, whatever it is. It's just not earthquakes. And I'm not here to be an alarmist. I feel like I'm trying to talk real. Because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's
not scare tactics, though. It's knowledge. And some people are afraid of knowledge, but people have to learn to deal with that nowadays. They have to learn to deal with knowing what to do in a critical situation. What do you do? And that's what we're giving. We're giving information.
We're giving power. Knowledge is power in this situation. And it's giving peace of mind. I know that since, you know, at least in my home, I do a lot to prepare in a lot of different aspects, in skills, in supplies, in learning different things that, you know, learning how to make soap, or learning how to make bread, or, you know, just things like that I'm so dependent on buying at the store. You know, when I learned that you could make your own ketchup, oh my heck, you know, there's like the world opened up. Like, you don't have to buy salad dressing, you know? So there's a lot, and it can become overwhelming. So it's important to start now, because it does take a second to get to where you want to be, and it's not going to happen overnight. But there are a lot of resources that we will post, links that you as a business owner can go to, that has operational checklists specific for business owners, that will start from A to Z. It will cover aspects of insurance and structures and your employees. And do you have this list? Do you have that list? Do you need a seismic scientist person to come in and assess your structure? What resources are out there to help you guys? And we'll provide all of that for you. I know that Alan's created a checklist for you. I've created a checklist for you. It's super simple, meant to just get you thinking about some things that you may have considered before. You know, like we talked about having extra food and water for your employees. You know, talk about communication. That's going to be key. The cell phone systems will be overloaded, and I don't know anyone who has a landline anymore.
No.
So, you know, do you need satellite phones? Do you need long wavelength radios to communicate with your family? If you're, you know, I don't know, like 3 miles, who knows? I don't know how far those things go.
Cell phone tower goes down, everybody's social media is gone. Most of the youth will be very upset.
Everyone's going through withdrawals from, no one will know how to talk to each other. No. But you know, you're going to need batteries, chargers. You'll need solar. You know, there's things that, man, I didn't even think about that. You know, so that's what these lists are intended to do. We want to be here as resources for you. Tell the listeners how they can get a hold of you if they want to talk to you more about this.
So I'm with, again, Alan Johnson Insurance Agency, American Family Insurance. You can get a hold of me by phone, which is 801-708-2962. That's my personal cell phone. You know why I give my personal cell phone? Because I care about my customers. I want them to be able to contact me for informative information. Now, if you have to pay a bill, I'm not the best person to call, okay? So I would call my staff. I have great, wonderful staff members. You always get human contact with me, but we are on 126 Seagull Lily in Sandy, Utah. If you ever want to come over, stop by. Even if you have questions, I don't care if you're one of my clients or if you're not one of my clients. If this has popped some questions into your head and you want to kind of go over that and review that with me, whether you switch to me or not, I am a source of information. So if you want to stop by at any time, you can absolutely stop by. I would love to have a conversation with you. So again, Alan Johnson, American Family Insurance. And then on my checklist, the big things that you have to be prepared for is pre-earthquake, during earthquake, and evacuation procedures. Okay, those are the three big things that you want to look at when you are looking about emergency preparedness, such as an earthquake. And what she's going to share with you guys on this podcast after this is a lot of critical information that every business owner should know. Okay.
Yeah, and I would even say it would go down to every homeowner. Everything that we've talked about today is completely applicable in the home. And I would imagine that the question about cars, like what happens if my car's injured in the parking lot at work?
Yep.
Is that covered under their insurance, my insurance? You know, there's a lot of this like crossover that people might want some clarity on. So imagine, hopefully you'll get some phone calls.
Absolutely. Yep. I'm imagining I will. This is a great podcast. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for coming. Yeah. And, you know, with the right stuff, my passion is about saving lives and helping others to save lives, not me personally. I want you to do the work. I want you to be out there helping your community, helping your neighbors, to strengthen your communities and your workplaces and build that trust and be prepared. So let us at The Right Stuff help you do that. We've got first aid kits for humans. We've got them for your pets. We have resources for education, for hands-on learning when it comes to tourniquet or wound care. We'd love to come in and help you with your business setup ideas for your earthquake plans or your safety plans. So reach out to us at The Right Stuff. We would love to help you. And we appreciate you joining us. And we look forward to talking more about this. And we will leave links in this podcast for you to inquire more and reach out if you have any questions. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.